Hello and welcome to UT10 News' interview with the new University of Toledo president, President Postel. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Michael.
Thank you for sitting down with us today.
My pleasure.
So for a lot of students, this is going to be their very first time speaking to the new president and hearing what he has to say. Do you mind, sir, telling us a little bit about your background and experience?
I'd be happy to. Allow me to start by saying what an honor it is to have been chosen to serve as the 18th president of the University of Toledo. This is a wonderful place. I've been here 8 or 9 months now. I started in July of last year. And unfortunately, I might have had a chance to meet some of you even sooner had it not been for all of our restrictions and having to meet over Zoom meetings and WebEx and so forth. And so now as the campus starts to come back to life, hopefully I'll have more opportunities to see all of you in person. But by way of background, I'm a medical doctor, and I actually grew up in Northeast Ohio, so just across the other side of the state. I was born and raised in Canton, and I went to the College of Worcester. I went to medical school at Case Western in Cleveland, and then I became a radiologist and moved to Minnesota, where I worked at the Mayo Clinic, and left the Mayo Clinic to go into academic medicine, and had a long career at the University of Louisville. I served in many capacities there. Ultimately became the interim president of the University of Louisville during 2017 and 2018. And then went off to the consulting world for a while before I was called back into active duty here at the University of Toledo.
So talk to me a little bit about being called back to active duty, as you say. What exactly was the process there that brought you back?
So I was in the business of helping academic medical centers and universities create their leadership teams, working with leadership teams to optimize their performance. And I was working at a number of great institutions around the country when a need arose here at the University of Toledo for, at first, an interim president. And so I was contacted by a friend of mine who runs an executive search firm. And he suggested that this might be a good fit because of the need for someone who had a medical background and also someone who had experience with higher ed administration. And so he suggested that I speak to the board, and the conversation began, and 8 months later, here I am.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
So you were chosen by the Board of Trustees, and you went from interim to now you are official president. What is going to be your plan for the 2021-2022 school year? This will be your first year as president, without coming in the middle of anything. Talk to me a little bit about what that's going to look like.
So we have a very ambitious agenda. Those of you who perhaps have followed some of the things that we've been working on through the fall of last year and now into the spring of this year will know that we have put together teams to address some of the more significant issues facing our campus community, things having to do with the way that we budget our money, the way we recruit students, the way we optimize our human resources, the way we look at ways to eliminate racism on our campus. These are some of the really important issues facing UT, and so we have teams that have been put together, and as we move now into the latter part of the spring semester, these teams are actually in full gear. They're meeting regularly, and you'll start to see some very nice results coming out of their efforts.
Excellent. And I'm glad you touched on the racism topic as well, because we're going to address that a little later on. So we're in a pandemic right now, and we mentioned before the interview started that these are hopefully the final days. We're looking at Ohio beginning to open vaccinations up for everyone 16 and older by March 29th. But that doesn't mean that the coronavirus is going to go away. What are some of your objectives to help address the challenges of coronavirus, for the University of Toledo specifically?
So we have made every effort to keep our campus safe, and I'm delighted to say that despite the difficulties we've been through, our campus has been reasonably safe through the whole school year. The number of cases of coronavirus among our students, faculty, and staff has been occurring at a much lower rate than in the community around us, and I think that's because the students, faculty, and staff have taken this problem very seriously. People have been terrific about wearing masks, social distancing, just all the things that we've been asked to do. There's been a lot of compliance. We've also done a lot of testing, and we've had accommodations available for those students who do have coronavirus or perhaps have been exposed to it. So now, as the disease is less prevalent and more people are being vaccinated, we are able to start doing things a little more like we used to, but we still can't call it normal. We're still going to be testing. We'll be doing a lot of testing in the fall. We're still going to be wearing masks, I think, for some time to come. I'm not sure how long. I've been vaccinated, but I'm still wearing a mask, as you can see. So I think that we have to still be extremely conservative so that this doesn't recur. You know, we want to make sure that the problem is dealt with and once and for all, as opposed to having a relapse.
So let's say that the state in the next few months says that they no longer mandate masks. Would the University of Toledo also follow suit, or would that be something that you would still require on campus even after the state says that you don't have to wear them anymore?
So we have been very careful all along to follow the CDC guidelines, also the guidelines of the State Health Department, the Lucas County Health Department. And if the situation changes such that on a state and national level there are loosening of restrictions, we would continue to follow those. We've not attempted to create our own rules here. We've been very diligent about following national and state advice.
Fair enough. So in your opinion, it's going to really be dependent on what the word is from the government bodies more than it is what the university feels for itself.
That's right. That's right. We've been careful about following that. There's a lot of thought that goes into the rules and regulations, and it's important to follow them.
Absolutely. So moving away from health for a second, I want to look at financial repercussions of the coronavirus. During the pandemic, the University of Toledo staff have seen pay cuts, furloughs, layoffs, and some of which are still, enacted at this moment. Can you talk to me about when campus staff, and even the ones that aren't present on campus today working, when can they expect to return to normalcy?
So in terms of actually working on campus, people are gradually coming back already and have been now throughout the spring. I think the last numbers I heard, about 60% of our faculty and staff are actually working on campus at this point. And we expect that number to go to about 80% come fall. So by far, the majority of faculty and staff will be back if they aren't already. And the same for students. We're expecting about 80% face-to-face instruction by fall. We're at about 60% right now, where students have at least one class face-to-face. The finances have been challenging, no question about it. There's been a dip in enrollment. There are fewer people living in the housing units than in a normal year, and that's by design. We didn't want people living in triples and quads during a time when there was a contagious disease, and so we thinned out the residential hall population. And that was the right thing to do because it was a safe thing to do, but it did have financial repercussions, no question about it. We're very fortunate that the federal government and then also the state have been helpful in providing some stimulus dollars to the university, and we've been very careful how we're using those, but a lot of those dollars have been used to get people back to work. There are very few people on furlough today compared to what perhaps was the case a year ago. It's not perfectly corrected. We're not back to normal, but we're working in that direction.
So in that correction, is there any faculty or staff that will not be brought back? Are there any programs that have just been lost in this process?
At the end of this, you'll have to ask me that again. The answer is I hope not. There have been some jobs redesigned, and there have been just some changes in what the university needs. But in terms of permanent cuts related to the coronavirus, that should not be the case.
Fantastic. Well, that's good to hear. So again, addressing financial problems with the university, as recently as May, Moodys downgraded the University of Toledo, and they said that we have a negative financial outlook. Well, I'm assuming you have some plans to reverse that trajectory.
Of course. So the bond ratings, whether they're by Moodys or Standard & Poor's, which are the two organizations that tend to do this for universities, they look at the university specifically, but they also look at higher education in general within the state and across the nation. And so when you see a negative outlook, it oftentimes is not just for one institution, but it's for many institutions that are similar to the one in question, because they're sort of looking at the higher ed market. It's challenging to find students. The cost of providing education is up. There's some students who are questioning whether it makes sense to get a 4-year college education, and we have to continue to make a good case as to why it's important to have an education. And so I think that the rating agencies look at all of that and they understand that we're in a challenging industry. For those of us in higher ed that have hospitals and medical schools associated with our enterprise, they look at that too, and they say, healthcare is a difficult business these days. It's hard to make a profit. And so sometimes those are the types of things that weigh heavily in Moody's decision to assign a negative outlook.
So going off what you said about us being a school that has a big focus on health, talk to me about the University of Toledo Medical Center. It seems like there's been a lot of debate what's going to happen with that, if it's going to remain in the ownership of the university. What can we expect to see happen to that institution?
So we're very excited about the changes that have taken place at the University of Toledo Medical Center. There's been a great deal of focus on that hospital going back to last summer and even before, sort of trying to understand its role in the community, what its potential is. And I'll tell you that is an excellent hospital. My mother was a patient there and got some of the best care I have ever seen delivered in a hospital, and I've worked in a lot of them. So it's a very fine hospital. It serves the needs of that South Toledo community very, very well. There are some important niche programs there. There's a great orthopedic surgery program there. We have a renal transplant program there. We have a great psychiatry and behavioral health service, just to name a few. There are a lot of important services that operate at that hospital, some of which are quite unique. And so we've studied the finances of the hospital and concluded rather quickly that there was a path forward. And we've been working diligently to stabilize the finances, and at this point it's clear that the UTMC organization is there to stay. The university is not planning to sell the hospital. We're fully committed to it. We're in the process of putting in a new electronic health record. We're hiring nurses, we're hiring doctors. Our quality ratings are going way up, and so there's still a lot of work to be done, but the future is bright over there.
And that's excellent. And I have to ask, we got to this point through years of potentially, mismanagement. How can we avoid that in the future? How can we make sure that we continue to make sure that University of Toledo Medical Center is an anchor in this city and doesn't become, a liability or, some kind of financial burden?
Well, I think that it was sort of a perfect storm as it pertains to the University of Toledo Medical Center. So the hospital business is a very hard business. It's not easy to make a margin. The expenses are very high. There's a tremendous amount of competition, both locally and regionally. And so if you layer upon that the coronavirus pandemic last spring, when all of a sudden elective surgeries were all put on hold and the hospital's business dropped suddenly, all of that came together at a very bad point in time and created a bad set of circumstances financially for the hospital. So, we're getting past a lot of that. We're putting in place some strong building blocks, and we're focusing on some of the programs where we know we can do well. And, I think that's going to be the key. It's just going to take a lot of ongoing effort by many people.
Fantastic. I like your optimism. So we're going to veer off into a different topic now. I want to talk about hazing, which has been a very serious issue in recent weeks. What are we doing on campus to prevent seeing a hazing incident here? And is there anything you'd like to address about the situation that could be avoided in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So hazing, sadly, is not a new problem. This has been an intermittent issue on colleges' campuses for as many years as I can remember. And it's not limited to just the Greek community. Almost any kind of organization potentially can have hazing as a component of its initiation process. Sometimes bands or other organizations on campus, you can see these kinds of activities. And so it's something that people really have to be well aware of and understand the danger of and how terribly inappropriate it is for many reasons. So sadly, there have been a number of incidents just recently in the area around us. There was one at Ohio University in Athens. There was one at Michigan State University in East Lansing. And then most recently down at Bowling Green here a week and a half ago, where a death resulted from a hazing incident that supposedly was a hazing incident. At least it's being investigated as
Allegedly,
such.
yes.
Yeah, allegedly, and involving consumption of a large amount of alcohol at an off-campus facility. And I think what this has done is it has caused, at least here in Toledo, our Greek community has really paid a lot of attention to this incident. It was on their radar screen before, but now it's front and center on the radar screen. And so Dr. Flap Cockrell, our Vice President for Student Affairs, and I, and Sammy Spann, our Dean of Students, we all met with the Greek leaders last Friday. And there were 40-some people on the call, and we had a fantastic conversation around how the community here is responding, things they're considering to make their initiation process safer and free from this kind of activity. And then I understand that Dr. Cockrell held a town hall a couple days later that was also very well attended, where this same topic was discussed. So this has been a very active conversation on our campus since the Bowling Green incident. And I've been extremely impressed with the student leaders that I've spoken to. They really have a good understanding of this problem. And I think they are poised to help provide really good guidance and leadership to the members of their fraternities and sororities. So it's going to require ongoing attention. We've put in place a hotline number that people can call if they have concerns or if they need to report something. We're making it clear that if someone reports something, they're not going to get in trouble, right? I mean, this is not the kind of thing that a person should get in trouble if they point out a problem. They should get a medal. And so we're trying to make sure that idea is conveyed.
So one thing I've noticed is that the Ohio Congress right now is trying to pass a law which will make hazing a felony if it can be proven in court. What do you think about that? Do you think that is something that would maybe prevent it in the future?
I think it's a great idea. Right now in Ohio, hazing is a misdemeanor, and as such, courts tend not to spend as much time prosecuting crimes that could result in misdemeanor offenses, whereas with a felony, there'd be much more aggressive pursuit of those kinds of crimes. And so this potential legislation is circulating for support. I'll tell you that all of the Ohio presidents, myself included, have endorsed this at our recent meeting. And we are prepared to continue to support it and hopeful that it'll eventually become law.
Fantastic. I mean, I personally also think that it is a good law and would hopefully prevent that kind of behavior. But what is our Greek life doing? You said you spoke to Greek leadership right now. Are they doing anything to make sure that those events kind of happen, or is it all just verbal commitments?
No, I think they're definitely doing things. They're spending a lot of time educating members of their fraternities and sororities. They're having very frank, upfront conversations about, why do fraternities and sororities do these hazing initiations? What's the philosophy behind this? Why would anybody do such a thing? And what would be, healthy, good alternatives, other ways to bring people into an organization and make them feel, very much part of the family without having to do these kinds of hazing activities. There's a lot of those kind of conversations taking place, a lot of frank discussion among members of these organizations. And also, I think they're looking to their national parent organizations for more guidance around this as well, as it becomes, a national issue, not just something we're dealing with here locally. There needs to be very clear guidance from the national organizations that this is just not acceptable, and that violations of this will result in disbanding of those chapters on our campuses.
I'm hoping that this unfortunate incident will actually wake people up, and it sounds like that's beginning to happen.
I believe so. I think there was awareness before, and I think there's now acute awareness.
So in terms of awareness, I want to move on to a slightly different topic that's also been in the news lately. And it's something you mentioned earlier, actually. There's been an enormous uptick in racial violence against the Asian community. And it's, as we have an Asian population on campus, what are something that we can do to keep our Asian students safe?
So, it goes beyond Asian students, obviously, right?
Of course.
Our objective here at the University of Toledo is to keep every student and every faculty member and every staff member safe. You should feel safe anywhere at any time on a college campus. And if you don't, we're not doing something right. So as it pertains to racial incidents, whether they're against Asian individuals or African Americans or Hispanic Latino or whatever the case may be, we have formed a team. I mentioned earlier that we have these teams that we have established to look at some of the things that we think are most meaningful and things that must be addressed on our campus. And one of the 8 teams is a systemic approach to the elimination of racism on campus. And we have a very large team, very actively engaged in this conversation. And they are looking at this from a lot of different perspectives. They're looking at it from perspective of hiring processes, how do we go about bringing people into the institution, once they are hired, or if it's the case of a student, once they begin to go to school here, how are they made to feel included, how are they made to feel welcome, what kinds of support organizations are there to make sure that their specific needs are met. There's an educational component to this in terms of lectures and sort of looking at the university as a community of scholars and trying to draw upon some of that knowledge to help educate everyone about the importance of this issue. Some of it has to do with the way in which the racist issues are approached on a school-by-school level. So rather than trying to do everything from a central perspective, it's important to have a diversity committee in every college and school where there's active attention to these kinds of issues on a more local level.
A tailored approach.
A tailored approach, that's right, because every place has different circumstances and different dynamics, and there might be a little different way to go about it. So there are many, many pieces to this, and they are laying out quite a complex strategy going forward as to the ways in which this will be addressed.
But were these discussions happening after the spa shootings, or are these just discussions that have happened over time?
Well, these are discussions that I began back in the fall of last year. I think we launched that particular team maybe November or so, right around Thanksgiving is when that team began its work, and that work will be ongoing. And what happened here in Georgia this week is just another example of why the work of a team like this is so critically important. That was their local manifestation of it. We don't want to see that sort of thing happen here. So what can we do to prevent it rather than figuring out how to deal with it after the fact, right? This is meant to be a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach.
Absolutely. Well, I have one final question for you. This is only the very beginning of your presidency. What do you see as your biggest challenge moving forward?
So I think the biggest challenge here is going to be to grow the university in such a way that it best meets the needs of the students, and in such a way that the university is able to be a real resource to our community. It's an obligation of universities to be a source of support for their city and for their region of the state, and that's through a whole host of community engagement efforts, through workforce production to help with economic development, and so if we can grow and grow smart, such that our students benefit and our community benefits, then we'll really have made some progress.
Are there any specific community engagement events on the horizon?
Well, there are always many of these. We're working actively with the mayor's office on a variety of projects that are of importance to them. We engage actively with almost every organization you can think of. The Regional Growth Partnership, I'm on their board, with Connect Toledo, with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Port Authority. We're having conversations with all of those organizations to try to understand their needs and see what the university can do to participate actively and help them with their agenda.
Are there any specific examples you can give me coming up in the next year or so that people could get excited about?
Well, one thing just here, I would call it a community event within our UT community, and that's our Day of Giving. And so I'll make a pitch for April 7th and 8th, which is an opportunity for faculty, staff, probably to a lesser extent students because they're paying tuition, but anyone who has anything to give. We're collecting money to help with the mission of the University of Toledo. It's an annual event, and it's a very important way for us to show allegiance to our own organization where we work and study.
Absolutely. Well, President Postel, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you want to mention before we let you go?
No, other than I'm thrilled to be here. I have really enjoyed getting to know the students, faculty, and the staff, the people I've been lucky enough to meet despite all the Zoom meetings and the masks. Everyone is very welcoming. The city itself has been welcoming to me, and I feel like I've been here a long time already.
President Postel, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.